Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Texas AMA's podcast. My name is Alisha Gupta, and I'm currently serving in 2022 and 2023 as chapter president here at UT Austin. This podcast serves as a place for students around the nation interested in marketing or marketing related fields to actually have the opportunity to hear insights from industry professionals or companies that may be interested in recruiting with students and professors who have mastered the balance between in class expertise and hands-on experience. For corporations, Texas AMA brings over 25 companies a semester to speak with our students in person and virtually about the dexterity of a marketer across industries and what a career in marketing can actually result in. This podcast, as well as any relevant links, will be posted soon on YouTube. Be sure to check out texasama.org for the next releases of the podcast as well, and follow us on Instagram to keep updated with the companies we bring in. Today, I have with me Kyle. Kyle Bunch is a VP and Managing Director of Strategic Development at RGA, a leading worldwide marketing and innovation company who helps clients like Nike, Samsung, Reddit, Google, and the XFL design and build a more human future. He has spent a majority of his career working with leading brands in sport, including Nike and XFL, as well as Beats by Dre, Verizon, Dick's Sporting Good, Major League Soccer, Angel City FC, NASCAR, San Antonio Spurs, Major League Baseball, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. A lot of familiar names in there, so I'm excited to talk a little bit about it. But Kyle is also an entrepreneur who launched his first endeavor at the age of 16 and has gone on to found multiple businesses, and most recently DocWorks, the operating system for marine professionals. Kyle is a Southern California native and a graduate of USC and the Marshall School of Business. And his family has lived in Austin since 2009. So I'm actually from California originally, and just came to Austin for school. So we did a little bit of a switcheroo there. But Kyle, super excited to have you on this podcast, and would love to just dive right into questions unless you have something to say.
No, I mean, all I have to say is, Alicia, thanks for having me, and then apologize up front for, I mean, a lot of things I'm probably going to say, but above all, that I sent through clearly way too long of a bio, and I apologize for making you read or have to cover all of those points. Most of them, I'm sure, are relevant to the audience, but thank you, everybody who's even right now still tuning in.
No, I think it's a really interesting, industry that you have expertise in, especially being sports and the intersection between sports and marketing. So hopefully some of those company and group and organization name drops will get more people interested
All
um,
about the name drops, definitely all.
and tuning in. But without further ado, I think we can start with, I want to say, like the beginning-ish of your career, and we'll work all the way up to RGA. And it looks like pretty early on in your career with Pinnacle, actually, you worked as a project manager. And I think it was along the lines of providing digital thought leadership to companies and agencies. And so when I really think of what a thought leader is, I think of driving innovation within the company and outside. And when I think of a digital leader, especially in today's day and age, we think more, digital assets and using technology in a way that's able to communicate messages to audiences. But I want to know for you, what does that digital thought leadership mean? And maybe how you saw yourself embodying this in your role at Pinnacle.
So I guess the short and cop out answer up front would just be it has changed so much. The bar has gotten so much higher, I guess, for everybody who's probably listening. Back then, being a thought leader, I mean, you kind of understood what a website was loosely, could, maybe manage to, configure an email server. And I say configure, like get someone's Outlook set up. These were the things that sort of in, my starting out in my career, you were sort of like one of the geeks who understood enough about marketing and some about technology, and that was it. Over time, it went from being a thought leader in terms of somebody who was, I think, in those early days, just plugged into whatever was coming. So back then, social media was things like blogs. I was just somebody who was tinkering and could speak to things in a room, put it in a client's language. And I guess that's probably the biggest key here is it's the complexity has exponentially grown as far as the things you might need to be a thought leader about in this space as a marketer in the sort of digital innovation space, all the places that those kind of converge. But ultimately, it's just, can I play translator between these things? Can I go really deep on a subject, on a culture, subculture around technology, innovation, all those communities that start to spring up, and sort of come back out of the wilderness and bring that to whatever that is, my company, my client, and just explain it in the simplest terms possible. And so as you can probably tell from this incredibly long answer to the first question, I was never the best at the simplest terms possible, but at least I think probably a mix of energy and a few words amongst hundreds or thousands that somebody might glom onto and go, oh, this guy sort of knows what he's talking about. So that would be, like I said,
Yeah.
I'll stop.
No, I think that's super interesting. I think, when we think of marketing, we think of communication in many different fields, in many different areas, because at the end of the day, it is just communicating the right brand message or company message to your audience. But not often do we kind of pair that with technology. At least we didn't used to until, the rise of not only social media, but, the hot topic for today's conversation would be AI, today being today's day and age. And in all the podcasts so far, we have mentioned AI, but I think it's even more interesting when AI and we think of even like transcribing or being a copywriter in the marketing field can be so utilized. So I guess the next kind of like softball question out of that would be, what needed to change in your role in order to be a thought leadership, continuing in your career as technological progress also continued, if that makes sense. So, like any,
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think first off, definitely a big Marshall McLuhan medium is the message kind of guy. So I think you talk about technology, you talk about communications, to me, they were probably always pretty interlinked, now more than ever, right? Like the different ways that you might connect someone, might have to connect with someone if they're a priority audience segment. So I think that's the first part of it. And with that, if the you know if what was once such a storytelling heavy medium, and your job as a copywriter or even art director was to just go observe what was usually like you were I mean, these were people who were in film school, these were people who understood storytelling in the dominant medium of the time. Now I just think you either uh, have to go really deep and be like, I have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram for my beautiful photography. I'm in the lab, I'm tinkering, and I've got a huge proof point. Or you have to have the breadth of, I'm on TikTok, and at a minimum, I'm actively on there enough to know what's kind of people are talking about. Or hey, look, I've got a whatever it is kind of feed that I'm posting things that people care about, and that spans across. You don't have to have everything, but you at least have to have, now more than ever, I think, some proof points that go, okay, I can go out and
yeah,
I'm qualified to be a thought leader on these things. That might be a Twitter thread you put together of funny stuff you managed to get Chat GPT to tell you when you talk about AI specifically. It might be going and building something on a weekend using an API, or even just a series of like Zapier, plugins. But tinkering and doing, I think that's the biggest thing now, is that thought leadership has to go beyond just like, here's pontificating, here's some bold statements. It's got to go, I went in, I played around, I really dug into the communities, I got on the right discords, heard what people were saying. So it's getting your hands dirty.
yeah. And it seems like the common, I guess, thread for that is like practice and showcasing of abilities. And so more now than ever, that hands-on experience rather than the theoretical, I guess, learnings would be even more important. So it's really pairing maybe knowledge with some sort of practice.
Yeah, and it's that, and then I remember for a while, people still say it, a fair amount, but like the idea of building in public, and I think the same extends to learning in public.
Okay.
Just there's like, take these things, ingest them, go make a something, or just lay out what you think in a blog post or something else and put it out there. Worst case, it's gone in 60 seconds, truly, like, and it's just lost to the ephemeral, sort of feed. Best case, I had, and you talk about like going back to the early days, like I had things that started out as a blog post, a handful of things in the days before Twitter, Facebook even existed, that led to me meeting somebody, that led to us starting a conference that eventually got, some people to attend, and then built a bigger community. Like that still holds true. I think, like, with all of this stuff happening, it's more important than ever to just raise your hand and say, I'm learning about this stuff, I'm curious about this, and you'll wind up getting connected to other people who are, and the places that can take you are somewhat limitless.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I used to really like this one quote in high school, and I remember going through like college interviews, and just like even in job recruiting interviews, when they ask you like, what's the quote that really resonates with you the most? And so I really held on to this one quote that was chasing opportunities, not accomplishments. And so really less about maybe what's on the resume and what you can list down, but those opportunities and experiences that allow you to grow. And I know just from personal experience, most of my internships following, or even like volunteer opportunities or classes or professors that I've met following maybe this year, had all been through pretty natural connections. And it
Right.
all been through just being really curious, having conversations with people, and then taking what I learned from that conversation and trying to put it into a practice for something that I was personally passionate about. And
Right.
so I think when you say learning in public, it just makes so much sense for me. And I'm also a media and blog junkie, so I love writing down thoughts. I love posting it. I'm really into media now, and we can maybe touch upon that a little bit later because I know you have some background in media and writing as well. But
Well, and not to interrupt, but I just wanted to key on something here, because I think it's so important. The moment, I assume a lot of this audience who's somewhere in the sort of college range of, everybody in that category probably started, or at least was applying for college at a moment when I think what you were looking for in a job was so much more, hey, I want to go get it. I want to go work at one of these elite places, because like, look, Google, Facebook, like big tech companies, some of these opportunities were felt so undeniably like an Ivy League school, like, oh, that's the best you can do. And that's sort of, and I saw a lot of, not to do my, like, paraphrasing of Howl or anything in like an old school like beat poet way here, but like, saw so many great talented people's minds wasted on helping some of these platforms sell ads, and at the same time looked at a lot of really smart people and said, like, I can't tell you that you shouldn't gun for that job with one of these huge tech companies out of college that's going to pay you absurdly well, but is that what you're into? And I say all of this just looking at you and the people who are watching this, and saying, like, being able to go deep on topics now that are really interesting to you, that don't have to just be like, how do I become the person that I think a few companies that overpay want? And so I think it's really important, as you talk about that sort of like learning, building in public, that you're entering into a period you maybe don't even fully grasp that, like, for the last 10 plus years, people shut off a lot of the dreaming, a lot, and not even dreaming, but the, like, hey, I could find something that's really of value, because there's this sector that's so willing to overpay, that there's so much capital that's just flooded in. I encourage everybody, just to the utmost, to go chase the thing, solve problems outside of, I mean, for lack of a better way, like, ways to get people to watch ads longer. Don't look at this small handful of companies as the only one who can go solve problems at scale. So anyway, sorry, I had to
no,
get on
I
my
think
high horse a
you
little
put
bit there,
sense
but
in it.
I think it's I don't know. I'm just maybe the old guy who's hoping that your generation and that your enthusiasm for things outside of, um, Papa Bads can help save us.
I definitely think so as well. And I remember a lot of, underclassmen, freshmen who, at least in Macombs, a lot of the freshmen take this one class in business administration, and they're required to, practice interviewing skills. And something that Macombs really stresses is an informational interview. And so you just go get information about someone who's maybe in a position that you want to be and how they got there, similar to, the interview that we're doing today, except just not published. And so I had a couple, underclassmen reach out to me about marketing and how to get a job in marketing. And their question is always, what internships led you to this point to, be where you are in the position that you are right now? And it's funny because my answer is always like small startups, or, I worked with some investment groups that are maybe not as popular, but they're in the impact investing sector. And I was really into social impact and the mixture between that and business for a long time, and still am. And so I went that venture route, and did some impact investing with a company called Sorensen. And, just it's funny to see their reactions, because it is so true. When you're really investing yourself in your passions, then things start to connect the dots, and you're practicing and you're building a toolkit that will prepare you for further jobs along the way, which is, I think, a really good segue to actually entrepreneurship in general. And I know you are a serial entrepreneur. Was it second or third startup right now that you're working towards?
Kind of depends on how much what standards we're applying to startups, or like whether or not we took certain steps to, get it buttoned up. But four or five different
Wow.
ventures that I've, embarked upon, or companies I've started that had different degrees of success. So, yeah, DocWorks was, um, one of the bigger definitely the biggest in terms of going out, doing the full thing, raising venture money, building out a big team, not just a bootstrap thing that gets some seed capital, but like, hey, we're out raising money from big VC firms. Um, so that's been, I mean, I definitely, I talk about like tides turning, things changing in terms of the moment in time. Definitely, walked into it with one perspective on the venture world, having worked more on the sort of venture VC accelerator side,
Mhm.
and worked closely with a lot of startups for the years leading into it. We launched in we were building in 2021, launched in early 2022. So, got a yeah. Anyways, I cut you off probably before you asked some of the questions, but I think it's all leading in and saying, learn have learned more out of that one than any of the other companies I started just operating in the current climate, and very thankful for that, and excited about where the company stands and where it's going. But definitely been the most challenging of any of them.
Yeah. And, no entrepreneurship feat is ever, it's ever going to be an easy one.
Yeah, right. I'm stating the obvious, right? In so many
No,
ways.
but I mean, it's kind of crazy to see the unique transitions, that you've been through in your life, and just how one person can take. 'Cause I know a lot of times students in college tend to shoot for that first job. They're like really, really betting a lot on the first job off of undergrad, but that might not always be where they end up later on in a couple of years. And it might not be the same trajectory for everybody. And you never know which one way your interests or passions or experiences can pull you. And so I know you, for one, moved from Pinnacle to, I think it was, founding Edge City Media, and building, that portfolio of media and current events. And so I was just wondering, how was that transition for you? Was it a natural transition? What made you want to, start some new, venture and endeavor in your life?
So I'll say this. I've actually been remarkably fortunate in that almost every company, at least when I was getting it started, had the blessing of my current employer and allowed me to get a solid, like if you're imagining the little like boat on the shore that some like all the kids racing their little like Boy Scout boats that they've made for the the
The
field
dirt.
trip, like gotten solid pushes off the shore from the employers I was working with, the people that I was working with at the time. And so in the case of when Rory and I launched Edge City, that was something that we had sort of been working on in some loose form since college, going through the entrepreneur program at USC. And that was something that, yeah, eventually our CEO at Pinnacle, Michael Sterner, gave us blessing and leeway to go build out a media company kind of separate while being able to maintain the job. So that was a big step in terms of just setting up something new and having people you're hiring, paying on staff as writers, trying to kind of get all that sorted. We had one point where we got not sued, I guess we got cease and desisted by Pat Riley. So you had some moments where you were trying to figure out legal issues when you definitely did not have lawyers or anything
Wow.
proper set up. So that was, I think in early on starting a business, I can't like recommend it enough. Again, sort of, I think there's this potential for people to, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody, like want to wait to get everything perfect. Oh, let me get a few more years of experience under my belt. Let me find a few. And hey, look, if you've got like the dream business in mind, you probably should, set it aside, build it out, get, stacks of notebooks before you go really do that. If you just want to get going and start to prove yourself, and like I it's not a bad idea to start something small, modest. It can be, I was just talking to somebody today who started a test prep business. I think that's a common one. Supplement businesses. Like, hey, look, if they're just having something that you can start. I've seen people that are doing a great job just selling for platforms like Notion or Shopify. Like just I built a theme. I built or I built a plugin. I built like a series of different paid like documents that people can download and make their own on Notion. Like those are good practices to get into. Both, I mean, certainly just the running a business part, but also there's like a mindset flip in terms of the empowerment side and feeling like, okay, I can go make things. I can do this end to end. Doesn't mean I'm better than a lot of people specialized at different parts of this, but I understand what goes into those different things, and I'll be that much better working with them. And then and then over time you sort of gain that confidence and you can go build something that's bigger, that you're like, okay, I want to go raise a bunch of money, hire a bunch of people. Like I'm ready to really plant a flag around this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I think like the first step is always the hardest step, and we know we hear that a lot, but it can be really daunting, especially in college or getting out of college when you think you have to establish yourself first. There's a lot of doubt going into it, especially as a marketer, I would say, because marketing is one of those really understood fields or misunderstood, sorry, fields in the sense that, you know, the outside perception and a lot of what the American Marketing Association is trying to break is that marketers are colorful. They're working with design only. They're working on, socials and building a social media presence. And while that is hugely important, and there is a lot that goes into that, and there's no discrediting to that amount, but there's a lot more, behind the scenes that isn't seen. And so sometimes when marketers come and they're asking, how do I get started in learning it? The advice would really just to be invest yourself in some sort of practice or field and take a stab at it, because especially again going back to technology, when technology is so at our hands and available, then you could pretty much just test and try things on your own to be able to take a first stab at whether it is, the data behind the analytics. I know Google Analytics and Google Ads, they're super available. They have courses available for you to go get a certificate in and just learn on your own. HubSpot has that. And so I think tying it all back into this idea of building and learning in public is great, because it really just hones down this like notion that if you're going and you're trying and you're constantly iterating upon the practices that you're doing and then putting it to use into some sort of experience or passion, then whether it's a job in marketing, a venture that you're starting, or a new business operation that you're trying to get into, you're gonna see your strengths sooner than later, essentially, which I think is like a crazy thing to think about and talk to, especially as a college student. But it seems as though one of the things of interest for you was media in particular, not only at Edge City Media Group, but even following being in the media space as a writer and a freelance columnist. And I was kind of foreshadowing this before, but I am very interested in the media space too. I had started a podcast. It was one of those things where was unsure, kind of just dove right into it because I love speaking, if that wasn't evident already. And just really wanted to hear other people's stories as well. And following that, I actually stopped the podcast a few months ago, and I'm working on a documentary about media players and how to use media for good and what that would look like if you have a powerful platform. But I digress. I'm really just interested to see, the crossover in skills that you've gained being in a position of entrepreneurship, being in a position of media, and then now at RGA, in ventures and advertising and marketing. What are some of the commonalities and what are some of the differences in all of those positions?
So I think a few things. First off, I think that's incredible what you're describing in terms of going from you know, podcast to documentary is like a leap that's intimidating to me, and I'm really impressed by, and that's fantastic. So you can't stress enough, building on what I'll say next, which is I really encourage everybody to look at different forms of media, longer form media, things that take their time a little bit. Like I can't remember the name of, God, I'm forgetting the name of the woman in Berkeley who's like the head of the slow food movement. Amazing chef. And she, I feel like there's a similar sort of slow media movement that has started to bubble up more, and people just, even if it's just been brought about by Netflix and streaming, but just getting out of feeds and the like fast twitch media culture where everything has to be reacted to so quickly, where so much of your media and podcasts and other things have to be so timely, and algorithms and Apple, everybody's like giving us huge, the incentives are all aligned to just keep feeding that. And it can work and you can build great businesses around it. And I still have various plans that sometimes venture into that space, but it can be really draining, and you certainly can end up at the risk of looking back and being like, what did I actually make? And so I think that longer form media and just being able to get into things where you can, tell an effective story, where you can take the time and not have it be just about how fast can I write up something quick and have a quick take. I mean, if that's what you're into, great. But that's a really tough spot. And I think it's a really tough spot not to be the like, AI is going to change everything and take all our jobs. But think about it. Like when we get into digesting quick hits of what just happened and providing a little bit of context for specific audiences versus longer form storytelling, which one do you think is going to be replaced faster by technology? And so I think right now everybody in the media fields, that's the challenge. I love media when you're, going back to what I was saying about, hey, go start your own business and do it. I loved media because a lot of times the cost was the lowest. Time was the biggest cost. If I was willing to put in the time and learn the medium, writing, or certainly photography, or going all the way what you're describing in filmmaking, then I didn't have to go like buy a bunch of units in a factory somewhere. I didn't, all these other hard costs weren't there. And so it was, to me, always the easiest to jump on. But so much of that is so squeezed out even before AI, just with so many content farms and different, ways that people are just have figured out scale outsourcing to Lord knows whatever robot or person in a place where it costs a lot less to pay someone to write up articles. So I think it's all to say the shift to media ultimately just became building on everything we're talking about here. Can you tell a good story, convey, take, go out in the wilderness, assemble ideas, digest them down into something that you can convey and communicate clearly, and then just have a medium that you're comfortable with to be able to tell that story effectively.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I haven't heard that phrase. I've heard the idea of slow media, but I haven't really heard that phrase, and, for me, I wasn't really thinking about AI at the time. I was just thinking that there's so much content about people and influencers and media channels and news channels that have such a big audience and how they're able to sway that audience either way. And so for me, the medium that just fit that was either like a docu-series or a documentary, because I didn't think it was fully capturable from a podcast or even social media page or clips. But when you put it into perspective like that, it seems like I had a really smart idea without the forethought of it. So the idea of slow media and slow processes for anything and really building upon it, I think definitely comes from your entrepreneurial self, but also might be very important for today's marketers that, social and just in time marketing is extremely relevant and important, but maybe diving out or zooming out and looking at the big picture and the overall story and theme and message can be equally impactful.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's uh, I work within the industry. There's a lot of value, like you said, to sort of targeted marketing, reaching people at different levels. There's also a lot of the machine across this big, huge industry that you could. What were the old stories about, like the war and the soldiers at the front that don't necessarily find out that the war is over for months and months or years even? A little bit of that sometimes feels applicable to the marketing world, where you're like, would we notice if we just shut these things off? Or on the other flip side, like if this company went away, like how long might these zombie ads just sort of live out? And it's not to denigrate anything that anybody does. I think everybody out in that machine plays a valuable role. That said, like a lot of it, when you're within and seeing it, it just becomes it's working, so why would we shut it off? It doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. It's just we've always had ads here, or like this is these Google ads, look at the data, it's working well. It doesn't mean that if that went away tomorrow, company would be doomed. It's just right now the way that things are done. And I don't want to discourage anybody from becoming part of that. I've had points in my career where I'm just feeding that beast and been compensated nicely and found ways to make that fun, if nothing else, the camaraderie of collaborating with lots of creative people. But you do have to kind of look at it and go like that. There are parts of it that are a machine, and if you're not ready for that, if you want more of the sort of not to like literally and figuratively, more of the 1984 ad and like breaking out of the like machine a bit, and being, if you feel like that could be something that feels like an encumbrance and you want to be more creative, and I encourage that, especially when you're younger and the risks are quite frankly lower, and you have room to take some swings. I encourage that. Again, if it feels like predictability within marketing and something where you can kind of grow steadily is what you want, great, go for it. But if you're getting like a little bit of twitch, as I described some of those things, take a swing first. Don't feel like you have to earn the right to do so.
That's awesome. And I think on that note, we can leave the audiences with one vague and hopefully one day answerable question. But when is it the right time to change a system that we've been living in? All right. Well, we're going to leave that up for the audiences to answer themselves. With that, thank you so much, Kyle. And make sure to follow along this podcast at texasama.org or on Instagram at texasama. If you have any other questions about a career in marketing, events that AMA organizes, or if you're a company that's interested in coming in and speaking with our students, please feel free to email ama@ut@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you for more episodes.